On this episode of the Virtual Compound, we are going to talk about PCS returning from Oconus. What does that mean? You'll find out.
So you'll likely notice that it's just two of us today. Amelia hasn't done this particular move, so she's not going to join us. Plus, it's 10 a.m. there, and they are in the middle of school. Katie, what time is it there?
It is 8:15 p.m. on Wednesday evening. It is Thursday morning for Amelia.
It's 5 p.m.
5
Nice
p.m.
and sunny still. As Katie said, we are talking about PCSing from overseas, and I have done this move twice. The first time was in 2015, and this time it was in the summer of 2023, so just recently, but both times from Okinawa.
Yes, and I have done the move once, obviously round trip. Moved there in, I always get it wrong, 2019 and returned in 22. For some reason, I want to say the year that we assumed that we were going, which was actually right
Yeah.
before Christmas in 18, but we didn't actually leave until 19. So,
Okay.
yeah. But with all of those, for those of you who are not affiliated with the military in any way, we have a lot of acronyms across here. PCS means Permanent Change of Station, just so you don't get a little
Yeah.
confused.
Yeah, we can take a minute and run down the acronyms that kind of pertain to what we're talking about today. As Katie said, PCS is permanent change of station. The bases or the stations where the service members are sent to work, they have different types of orders that send them to those places. So PCS means they're moving. And then orders are the official documentation from the government stating where the service member is, where they're going, who's going with them, for how long. It's basically their, guide for life.
Yeah, BAH is Basic Allowance for Housing. It's somewhat self-explanatory, except that it's not the housing on base, it's for the housing off base. And so it's what we would actually get paid to live in the area of the base that you're going to, and that varies by rank and location. CONUS versus OCONUS. So those are two words, they're basically words because we use them like words. They sound very intimidating, but they're really not that much. They are entirely self-explanatory when you read them. It's continental US versus outside continental US. So CONUS, OCONUS. COLA. COLA is something that is only done in very specific locations, specifically to overseas, and is the cost of living allowance. It is the change in your pay according to what it is required to be able to live in that location compared to what you are getting paid. And that is based off of a number of factors, some of that being the exchange rate for the country that you are in.
I think it was last year. It might have been 22. I'm kind of out of it. Really focused on retirement. But last year, I think they took away COLA pay for everyone but Okinawa, and it had dropped quite a bit.
Yeah.
But it's just to kind of make up for. I mean, it's a tiny island. Things are expensive. If you've ever been to Hawaii, things are a little bit more expensive there because everything has to get shipped.
Yes, so the best way to think of Okinawa is the Hawaii of Japan. They actually will call it themselves the Hawaii of Japan. So
Yeah.
think of whatever it would take to get to Hawaii is what it's going to take to get to Okinawa, even if it's just
Unless it's
there.
American stuff. If it's American
Right.
stuff, then it's even further. Yeah, and there's so much to break down for everyone in the civilian world. And after 20 years, I still get tripped up.
So in general, this is quite the beast to cover. We are going to try to not bore everybody to death, but it's also a very interesting thing to think about because most of it's stuff I had not thought about before making this. I came back in the summer of 2022. We were sent to New York City of all places, and when I say that is like a complete 180, it's almost like doing a 360. Like you don't need to back up where you were. Yes, we were technically going back to an island, but we're going back to one of the most crowded islands in the world. And that was a very big shock in so many ways.
Yeah, but I think that would be a shock to anyone's system, no matter, like, New York is New York.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a shock to anyone. But
Yeah.
coming from Okinawa, I can
Yeah, I mean
I can imagine the kids.
the shock was insane. Like just getting off the plane and walking down into customs. Have you ever been through customs at JFK?
Mm-mm.
So the customs, it's so weird because you literally like all of these airplanes literally funnel into this gigantic room. Like it's huge. And you just get in one of these like ridiculous amounts of lines. Now, I mean, there were hundreds of people in this room. Like it was probably a fire marshal's like worst nightmare. So anybody who's listening and has gone through this, you probably have some idea of what's going on. That day we were really lucky and they were actually shuttling active duty military like straight through. So we bypassed all these hundreds of people. It was crazy. But then we step out of the building and to get from international to the domestic terminal, you have to go outside, cross the street, go up an elevator, come back in. And we step outside, and the first thing Lexi does, and she was 3 when we left the country, and she was 6 when she came back, like almost to the day, 3 years. And we step back in, or we step outside, and of course, there's all this noise and cars. And she's just like, Mama, 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 what is that beeping? What is the beeping? I was like, that's a car horn, honey. And most of you won't understand this, but the Japanese do not use their horns. Like,
No, it's incredibly rude.
yeah,
It's
incredibly rude.
only in serious emergencies.
Yeah, like even honking to get your kids to come outside is like a
Mhm.
no-no.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so that was the first of our culture shock coming back. Like,
Yeah, and you know what? My kids said the same thing. I mean, my oldest, well, so we had 4 kids going there, and when we were going there, they were almost 14, almost 15. Gosh, what year was that? Whatever, it's fine. Almost 20, 14, whatever, 12, and then 10 and 8. And when we got to LAX and they had kind of a similar like customs situation, and because we were military, they let us go, and we were like this long train of carts with all of our bags.
hmm
Um, everyone was staring, and that's another thing because that's
Oh,
special.
that is special.
Yeah. Um, my kids, we step outside and they're all just like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot this is what America sounded like. It's
It's
loud. It's
loud.
the horns." And
It's
you know, I
so
mean,
loud.
there are people that smoke in public and things like that in Okinawa, but it's just a whole different element
Yeah. I mean,
here. Like it was crazy.
yeah, and like with the smoking for sure. That's weird because I hadn't necessarily thought of it. The Japanese actually really smoke a lot. There are
They do.
vending machines along the road. There are so
Hmm.
many vending machines for so many things, but there are also vending machines for just cigarettes anywhere. Like just walk along the road, you're gonna find one. But it is so loud. Like the quietest airplanes you're ever gonna be on are a Japanese airplane. Like it is
Hmm.
absolutely silent. It's
Yeah.
eerily so. Um, but yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and another thing, when we were leaving there, I have a video of the tarmac employees bowing to the plane.
See, I wanted to, but we ended up being seated inside. I couldn't see out. I was so
Mm,
upset. I wanted to see that. It was such a special thing. Like the people who get
yeah.
to see it, it's kind of like I when did I cry? I cried when we landed in JFK because
Mm,
I had flown in Oki, of course, but when
hmm.
we like left PCSing for anybody that hasn't moved. I mean, so a move is stressful and it's just any kind of move. You're build up, you're getting all your stuff together and it's all the chaos of making sure you don't have anything left behind. Is it going to break on the move? Is it going to get delivered? Are you doing it? Whatever, like all of the things. But a PCS move is just it's so much more frequent than most people move. And
Hmm.
so you just get into like mode, and we'll get to that in a little bit of kind of how we do, but you get into do mode and you don't really get to work through all your emotions as it's happening. And then all of a sudden it just kind of hits. And the night before was really rough um, because we actually spent the evening uh, with Amelia and Sam and the kids, and we were all fine until we had to leave their house. And then it was so bad. I mean, like, I'm crying, the girls are crying. I had Amelia, like, as close to crying as you're going to get Amelia to cry. And it was so much. But then I was, back into go mode for the next morning when we had to go. But when we landed, like literally touched the tarmac in JFK, and I just like lost it. I was like, that's it. It's one of those things that you're not going
Hmm.
back. But then once
Yeah.
you do something or it's the end of something and you realize that it's over, it's truly over, then it's just that
Yep.
adrenaline crash or whatever it is. And that was a doozy, that
Yeah.
moment.
We had similar like um last nights because we I don't know what we did the last day. I can't remember. I think we went out with Amelia again, and then we went over to Amelia's and we did the goodbyes, and everybody was crying.
Hmm.
And I mean, not that she hasn't had friends there, but losing you and then a year later losing me, like being her manager is being her brain. And
Yes.
so it was like an elevated, like I've lost both my people, I think.
Yeah.
And her kids were close to our kids, and everybody was just super close. So, and then I had their van, so like
Oh,
I gotta
we
see
had
her
the
and say
van
goodbye
too.
one more time, and yeah, I gotta say goodbye one more time in the morning. But
See,
we got to the airport, and I was like, okay, okay, and then we took off, and I'm watching my island that's been my home.
hmm
I've raised my kids for 6 years here, and I'm just all the feelings, and I'm crying, and I'm nursing the baby so that she's like got the ear
right.
popping thing, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a rough one. Like, it's
yeah,
amazing because the 3 years that you're there, and for other branches, not everybody, we're a Marine Corps, by the way. I'm not sure we really discussed that
yes.
too much.
I think we
But
did in our first episode.
we did, you're right. But we typically have 3-year orders for wherever we go when family is also with us, and we'll get into that in other times. But you're there and you get 3 years to live there, not just be like my last year here was spent in New York City. Um, and I was basically a long-term tourist, and that's how we thought of it also.
Yeah.
But um, we got to be a part of Japan as much as we could during COVID, but we got to be a part of it, and you got to even more so the first time because you didn't have
Hmm.
COVID in the middle of
Oh yeah.
yours. Um, so so that is just one of those things that it's absolutely amazing. And then Okinawa from the sky is gorgeous. Like
Yeah.
it, it
Well, nothing does it justice.
no, nothing does.
Yeah.
Like truly nothing does. Even people who do these like outrageous pictures,
Hmm.
I'm going to admittedly get on a tangent here. That one picture that always pops up of the bridge between, what is it, Miyagi and or whichever one is it, that or
Hmm.
going to Hamahiga.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's where we did photos.
yeah, and so it's
Yeah.
like somebody had, I don't know how they took the picture, but they made it look like it's this giant swooping down bridge, kind of like they did
Hmm.
a panoramic from a weird angle so that it does this like
Yeah.
weird thing. It doesn't. People who watch that, it doesn't. But you have to go like totally dramatic to try to really capture what it is, and yet it's not going to capture it. Like,
Yep.
it's just not. Anyway, we got there before COVID. We had a
Hmm.
few months without it, and then it hit. And then we left during COVID, technically towards the end. So we left as the US um, was coming out of it. New York having been one of the closest to Japan in shutdown
Yeah.
situations. We were, of course, going there. And so they still had some mask recommendations, a few areas where they called it mandate.
I'm not a mask um, person. You know the Glass
Yeah.
Onion Knives Out?
Uh-huh.
You know the Birdie's mask that's like a net?
Yes.
Do you remember when one of the moms came in with that? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was like in
The
awe,
epic.
like bowed
Yeah.
down
It's like, I mean,
because
you
genius.
didn't get that specific in the orders that you gave us.
Exactly. And the
So,
fact that her husband was so high ranking, like she could do it. Like if we had to wear masks more strictly on base at that time, I probably would have ordered them too.
right.
But I didn't go out in town a lot unless I needed groceries because we had to wear masks, and we were wearing masks until last spring, so
April.
spring of
Yeah.
2023. Yeah, and so we only had a few months mask free in Okinawa
And then
before
you
we
left.
PCS. So for basically 3 years, we had to wear masks everywhere.
Yeah. Were
Yeah.
there still any restrictions for that when you got on the plane though? Or was like who did you
Um,
fly? I don't even remember who you flew. Did you take the Patriot or were
Um,
you
no,
no?
we were able. We always get commercial, like depending on how you do things, and if you know how the system works,
Right.
you can get commercial flights. And we had a dog. We actually brought our dog out with us, so bringing her back again, that's like a whole episode in itself of traveling overseas and moving with a dog. But coming back, we had to bring her and there were no pet spots, so they got us commercial and we had the baby. So it was Japan Airlines when we left, and then I think it was like American or
Yeah, that's what
something
ours was.
coming
Yeah.
back. Yeah. And I mean it was fine, it was super easy, like the kids did well. They're all, they're travelers, they've done it. The baby actually slept the entire time. I got the footrest
Lucky.
inflatable thing,
Oh, yeah.
and she slept between us, and it was good getting back. She was really, as long as I was holding her, she was fine. But because of the amount of baggage we're allowed when you're traveling on orders, you're allowed extra bags. I think the service member, it depends, person to person, maybe your
Right.
situation, but my husband had 7 bags for him, and then I think I had, like, each dependent then had 4 bags.
Yeah.
So with that and the kennel, I mean, our dog's 35 pounds. So we had the big Mama Jamma kennel.
Yes.
We had 35
So
with
that's
like the stroller and the car
right.
seat. And
We had 4 bags. We had two checked bags, a carry-on bag, and a backpack for each person. And then Wyatt may have had an extra, but we may have tried to limit his because just we were going straight to Oklahoma and then doing all that stuff. So we didn't have anywhere to go because we
yeah.
needed to go to New Jersey. That was all part of the big issue with this move too, is we couldn't get there to start looking at stuff and coming back in the middle of a housing like situation where it's almost a housing crisis, right? Like no, there are no housing.
Mm-mm.
And so we had to kind of figure that out. And actually, oh, and on top of that, I had Amelia ship me two, no, I shipped them. And then I had my sister-in-law did 100 pounds worth of boxes. Two, they're costume boxes. I got them from Amelia. They
Of
were
course.
costume boxes from, and they came out to exactly 100 pounds between the two of them. And because it was more stuff we couldn't fit in our suitcases, I'm like, I'm not going
Yeah.
out and buying more suitcases just to get this stuff home when I don't need it later.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we were going to be living in an Airbnb for a month, visiting family. So, like, there were things that we needed, and with the baby, and with the moving, and getting schooling going, and dance. We brought the platter tutu in case there was like a competition we had to get to. We didn't
Right,
know all the things. And then my husband, so sleep's really important to us, and this is a tangent here, but we have the Uller, so it cools you as you sleep.
nice.
And we've spent a lot of time and focus and energy on figuring out like the best quality sleep we can get. So we have
Right,
Ullers, and we have like the first gen or second gen, like the really big, probably like 12-inch by 6-inch by 4-inch mechanism that holds the water, a
mm-hmm,
reservoir, and then you get the pad that like it runs through. So he packed that. He's like, I can't sleep a month without it.
right.
So he packed that. And honestly, I was so grateful for that because we were at an Airbnb in Phoenix. And that was the
Oh,
only time, like, the baby still wasn't sleeping through the night. She had just started sleeping through the night. We moved out of the house
mm,
and into
and then
lodging.
you
And then
just
it was
mess
like
it all up.
disruption.
Yeah,
Yeah. So she finally started sleeping better when she'd come to bed with us in the middle of the night because we had the Uller.
yeah,
So yeah, we brought things that, and then it took another month to get our stuff. So I
yeah.
was very grateful we overpacked.
Yeah, seriously, very much so.
Yeah.
I would have been, well, and I overpacked some because, like I said, we were living with them, but then we were going to be visiting a couple of different states. And I forgot, Zoe was going to her first summer intensive that year. Now,
Yeah.
she had just turned 11. She turned 11 9 days before we left Okinawa. And then she had 9 days when we got back before she had to be in her summer intensive. So it was like,
I
you
remember
have
that.
to be sleeping when we get there because then
When
it,
we tell you.
yes, because then it was a 2-hour drive every morning. So she was up at
Yeah.
6:30 every morning and we drove 2 hours to get her to this very first year of summer intensive. So,
Yeah.
it's a pretty big deal. I was just like, man, the chaos, it's real.
Oh yeah. The first time we came back, our oldest was 9. Our littlest was 3. We got that split in there of 2 years. And so 9 years old, first time she is allowed a screen in front of her, full access, like hers, and
Right.
on the plane. And she's in the middle with her siblings, and we're on the two end. And it's getting like midnight Okinawa
Yes.
time, and we're like, honey, you should probably sleep. And like she looks over at us and she's like, I'll be fine. And then she pulls her AirPod out, like, I might be a little emotional though. And then she goes back to it. And so we're like, she knows herself. Okay. And we had a lot of bags then. We had a dog at the time, smaller kennel, but lots of things going on. We get it. We get into LAX again. Like, and all the things are piled, and we don't have like car seat. We have booster seat for the one child,
Right.
and it's like cockeyed, and she's pushing it, and then it spills, and waterworks like
Oh
meltdown, and we're just
no.
like, yeah, that's right. And then she slept the entire way down. We had our car already, and down in Carlsbad and set
Oh
up,
my
but it was just
gosh.
like, oh, I will never forget her little face looking over at me,
Oh,
just
I'm
like,
sure.
I'll be fine. Just a little emotional.
Just a little emotional, and she proved herself right.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, she
Yes,
knows
she
herself.
was.
That's good.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so with all of that, we kind of jumped over a few things. The preparation
yeah,
for leaving is slightly, on some respects, it's easier, because you're not going into a new country. So there aren't a bunch of things that like you have to go through. We had talked about like getting over there, but
yeah.
we still had to do certain medical appointments. You still have to make sure you're up to date on all that stuff because by the time you finally get settled, it could be for some people it's immediate. For us, it was three
Hmm.
months later. So, by that point, it's time to be getting on the schedule for your next doctor's appointment. So, you had to go through and get medical records. Our dentist was out in town. Now, he was a dentist who basically he did see some locals, but he saw so many Americans that they knew what we needed. And when we were like, all right,
Yeah.
we're leaving, they're like, here's your disc with all of your
Did you
stuff.
go to
White.
White or Sakura?
I went
Okay,
to White.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, there's that, but then there's also like making sure everyone's passport. I mean, we have special travel passports for military, but making sure that that's good to go.
mhm.
Making sure that you have a birth certificate
Yeah,
if you
that
have
one
a
I didn't have to
family.
deal with. Lacey, please. That was you had to do that a couple times.
I did. I had to do it with the last two. Our fourth was born the first tour, which was like the greatest experience ever, aside from trying to get her birth certificate, but that's another time. And then that she was a year old because we drag our feet on these things. And then at least this time, Penelope was 7 months old
Okay,
when we got it. I think or maybe even younger. We did do it before we knew we were coming back. So, props
that's
to
one
us.
thing.
And
Yes.
then she has the cutest passport photo
Oh
of
my
any child I've
gosh.
ever seen.
Wait,
That's my
she
extra
has
one.
hair. So Lexi's
Yeah.
hair being blonde, they had
Mm-hmm.
to retake her picture 5 times because they couldn't get facial features, they
Were
couldn't get her
you were you
head.
in DC? Did you go to the Pentagon?
No, we went to somewhere near
Okay.
Quantico. We didn't even go on
So
Quantico, but I don't remember.
when we were in Falls Church, like it always happens, and this is like some people's experience. Obviously, going to Okinawa, we knew like we had a year, but the first time we found out we were going to Okinawa, it was in uh, 2011, and we just found out we were pregnant with Charlotte, and it was October, and it was either go unaccompanied or go with your family. And I was like, hey, we honeymoon in Okinawa. I will do that move. I love it there. I can't wait to go like
Right.
live there. We honeymoon. Great, great, great. Cool. As Amelia would say, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Um, but then we're like rushing in a mad rush because we had 30 days to get everything done before we had to be out of the area. So we went to the Pentagon to get photos, and my 4 little blonde children, white blonde hair, bright blue eyes, like tan a little bit, but it's like December.
Right.
She's like, these photos will work. It was dots for eyes and nostrils. So she sent them off and then called and was like, yeah, they won't work. We go back in, and my husband's like, would you like me to take them, because those look like the last ones? And she was like, oh yes please. He adjusted the settings and whatever, but yeah, we had to do it twice.
It's so annoying. I mean, it is
Uh-huh.
what it is, but
Okay, so aside from the birth certificates, passports, medical appointments, making sure your pets have all their paperwork in order. You have to go to the vet a week before your flight and get them medically cleared. But then you also have to make sure an appointment before that, you have to make sure you have all their shots. Then the week before, you have to have that appointment, and then you have to go within like a 72-hour window and have another, like, the clearance that this dog is okay to fly. And then you have to have multiple copies of that with a certain, like, I think it's a blue signature. And then what we do is we take that, a copy of our orders and all the dog's paperwork, and we tape it to the top of the kennel. And even the kennel has to be specific, like it has to have metal clamps and it has to have a specific door and they have to have this and that, but not anything in there with them. And then, of course, what took into effect January 1st of this year of 2024, um, anyone PCSing with their pet from overseas actually gets reimbursed for the cost, which can, cost up to $5,000. But, so that, I mean, it's those elements. But then, you have to get your kids school. If they're in school, you have to get the paperwork. You have to get rid of any property you have, like the cars. You can only have
Yes.
one car per license, and you have to have the special license in Japan. So we had 3 cars, we had 3 licensed drivers, so we had to sell those and make sure all that was taken care of. And then, trying to get rid of the yen. I still have yen. I'm going to send
Oh,
it to
I
Amelia's
100%.
kids
We still have
for
yen though.
sure.
So much yen.
We'll keep some of it, but I mean, I have bills. Like, I have big
Oh,
bills, so
no.
those kids are getting blue sealed probably.
Same.
But so coming back to it, like, when I guess we can transition out of that a little bit. When it comes to PCSing, my husband and I each have our roles. Like, I am in charge of anything related to the house and the family and getting us to the appointments where we need to go. Like, he tells me these are the things that are expected and they require. And then I am on top of that. I make the appointments. I get everyone where they need to be. I get the transcripts. I set up for the transcripts to be, taken care of or whatever. I take the dog. I do the things, make
Right.
sure that everyone has the meds. I sort the house, because when you're moving, even if it's overseas and they're packing everything up, you still have to sort what you're keeping, what you're getting rid of. There are things that we cannot like
Yeah.
send in with the movers, and then he does everything with, like, the itinerary, work stuff, worky things, tickets, the movers, that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. And
We don't have a binder, but
Wyatt has a binder for his stuff. I know
yeah,
everybody's like, get a PCS binder. And to a point, I get it. But what I tend to
yeah,
do is I find a notebook and I make lists. And I make
yep.
so many lists. Like, it just starts. So we found out that we got the spot in New York City just before. What?
This is
Is it
the
really?
book I use. Yes, because I have my to-do list,
Yes.
my to sell, my to give away,
Yes.
uh, and then the dates of, like, the things that we needed to get done
It's so
at
funny.
the time,
That's
packing
mine
lists
too.
for each person. Yeah. And then, oh, I don't have it pulled out here, but I made a master calendar that's got, like, the grid of, 7 days. So it's every day of the week from, like, mid-May all the way, like, to 2 weeks stateside. So it's
Yeah,
like 2 months, but split up over 3 months. And then literally everything was penciled out in that, and that hung on the fridge, and that was the master calendar for the whole
for
family, so that
everything.
they knew what needed. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's funny because you and I had like the same list and I would share mine, which is normally here, but it's actually in my nightstand because I started leaving it
Yeah.
there. So I just pick it up and like start writing
Mm-hmm.
stuff down. Um, but my lists were the same, but it was what's to sell. And then this is something else you have to do on a PCS and anyone who is moving and having, um, uh, movers, especially, and not this bad movers are out there. Not all people are bad movers, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is if your stuff has to go into storage or there's some weird thing where things get unloaded and reloaded, write down your serial numbers for your electronics. Like you have to write it down. So we went through and I have all of those lists that you mentioned. And then I had the serial numbers for any electronic from the Dyson to, we didn't go as far as like the toaster, but
Yeah.
anything, the Fire, our Amazon Fire, like we had all of that stuff was all in there
Yeah.
because it that money adds up. Like when you come back, you're already having to spend a ridiculous amount of money coming back as it is. And
Oh, yeah.
then you add in nonsensical things like that, and I mean nonsensical in that it should not have been lost or it should not have gone anywhere. When going overseas, everything is put into crates. And now, while we were actually gone, um, it was while you were there too, I'm pretty sure, but they approved for um, CONUS moves, so anybody within the continental US, that does not include Alaska and Hawaii because they already fell under this. But anyone in the continental US, as long as you're moving 800 miles, you could also be crated. You could request it as long as the company had that ability. You could be crated. I highly recommend crating
Hmm.
because it just allows for so much more. One, when you're being put into a truck, oftentimes you're put in with one to two other families. It's very easy to get your stuff mixed up because it's just individual boxes. It's very easy
Yeah.
for everybody's boxes to go around. But in crates, it's also because it's a massive Tetris game. Anybody that loves Tetris, go work for a company that like packs people's stuff up into crates because to watch them fit their stuff in
Yeah.
is really quite remarkable, but because of that it doesn't move around and you're actually less likely to end up with broken things as long as it was packed in the boxes correctly to begin with.
Yeah.
That's
They
and that's a
ruined
different thing.
our $5,000 rug
Oh,
because they rolled it up and then put it, like, folded
folded
it into a
it.
horseshoe shape and taped it. And so
Wait, was
that's
that
one of the
going
things
there
we
or
had to
coming
claim.
back?
Coming back, he made it there fine. And then coming back, they did this. And usually it's the movers stateside that are just like more neglectful and they just don't really care as much. And the Japanese are very precise and careful. But
Very.
I don't know why. Like, they were a little bit thrown off. They didn't realize the guy who came and surveyed didn't do a great job, I guess. So they folded it and now it's like delaminating, it's pulling apart. So it's one of the things we have to claim. And they're like, oh, we're going to send someone to clean it. Like, no, 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 it's clean. It's ruined. Like,
Yeah,
it's like bubbling. And anyway, so I mean, it's that kind of stuff. It's, they will reimburse us for things that they damage,
they do.
but there are a lot, and they do reimburse us for, like, I forget what it's called, loss, or
um
like the cleaning products and the condiments and all that stuff, that
yeah,
if
I
you're
can't remember
moving
what it's cost
stateside,
now.
you can throw it in a cooler
Yeah,
or
and
whatever. You can
drive
give
it
it to your
wherever you're
neighbors.
going. Yeah,
Yeah, but like some things, like, we're kind of weird about that kind of stuff, but you could give things away to your neighbors, you can give cleaning products, but a lot of the time you're literally throwing stuff
throwing it
away. And
away.
even if you're giving it away, like, you're still losing out if you have to buy, a brand new bottle of Pine Sol because you have to clean the floors before you leave the house. Then you just have this bottle that
That's a big,
you
yeah.
bought it for no reason. Like,
Because
yeah.
like in the States, that's one of those things. Well, I'll come back to that in a second. So I was gonna make a note on the movers. Like the
Yeah.
movers in Japan are amazing, except that they were so focused on getting things flat that they, in two instances, one, they broke our bed. Our bed had this like L shape to make it look like it was a platform, but it wasn't, but it like stuck out on the sides like it did.
Yeah.
And they ripped the top off. So it looked
Oh
like
my
this. It
gosh.
was an L or a T, like half of a T, and they ripped the top off. Well, it's IKEA, so like it's not removable, right? Like once you get it together, the things that can be removed, we took apart.
Mm-hmm.
That is not. So we can't put that back together. And that's not something that will be well reimbursed because the point of us having IKEA stuff is that when it dies, it's going to like die because we move a lot.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was fine. And so that was really frustrating. We couldn't really claim that and actually get any money back. And then the other one, I had this frame that kind of looked like a window frame, and it had three glass jars that worked as vases that were just hanging. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, it's not going to be flat because they hang in the middle. It's a windowless frame, so it just hangs in the middle and they kind of swing. He cut the string
Oh
so
my gosh.
so that he could wrap the like frame flat and then he wrapped the things. It was like I didn't hang those there. I don't have the ability to put them back on without going out and now buying new things. So it's sitting in a closet somewhere and
Yeah.
like reading. But back around to the cleaning stuff. So that's in the States. Even if you're going to Alaska, now Hawaii is obviously a totally different thing, but even if you're going to Alaska, you could take all of your own cleaning supplies.
Yeah.
Like that stuff doesn't expire as long as you have the ability to drive. And I know people who do. I know people who were stationed in Alaska and, they drove one of their vehicles up there themselves and just were on the ferry. But you can take all of that stuff with you. That is a lot of money. We got back, we landed
Mm-hmm.
in New Jersey, and we got there the night before the first set of movers. And normally, when you pack up for an overseas move, you get two shipments. You get an express shipment, and you get what we call an HHG, which is household goods. And the express shipment, which I think actually had UAB, unaccompanied baggage. I was like, wait, we have
Right.
another one. Here, we'll just add to our continually growing virtual glossary over here, virtual everything. Um, but that one usually comes earlier. And ours did meet, like got into the States, but it shipped from California later than it was supposed to. So it didn't arrive until 2 days. Well, it arrived during the weekend. They couldn't deliver it until Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we actually got our HHG first, which is our big stuff, all of our furniture and all the things. Well, all of our cleaning stuff that we could, like our mop and our broom and all of that, were in the express because that's what we sent out last so that we could keep the house, as clean as possible. And so the night we got into New Jersey, we had to go to Target and buy all new cleaning stuff and not
Yeah.
just the sprays. Like we had to go buy brooms
Mops,
because, yeah,
brooms. Yeah.
because it was a brand new house and the landlord and the construction people didn't actually clean it. Like we walk up and coming from Japan, you don't wear your shoes. You don't wear your shoes in any buildings unless like it's a public restaurant, and even then sometimes you don't wear your shoes. And
Like you have to
so,
take wear their slippers in the bathroom.
right, yeah. And so we walked inside and immediately took our shoes off when we got to the top of the stairs. And
Ooh.
um, I like stepped on the floor and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so dirty. And they
Mm-hmm.
talk about an old school idea. They had a vacuum system built into the building, brand new building, and they had a vacuum system built in. So I was like, okay, that's what I did. So I had like, the giant hose from the wall
Yeah.
and like going around and cleaning everything. But we had to go and buy all of that. And I think we spent $200 on cleaning stuff and like toiletries just
Yeah.
that
Which,
night.
yeah,
And
it's
that didn't
it's
include
it's
groceries.
it's yeah, it's the most common thing, and then it's little things you don't even think of, and I can't even think of anything right now, but like going back to, the issues that you had with the movers packing things up, like there are so many differences culturally
Yeah.
that they don't think about that's automatic for them. And it's kind of like with the cleaning thing, like everything is so clean there that when we come back, we're kind of in a state of shock.
Yeah.
Not
Very
just
much so.
like, because I mean, we're prepared, we're told we have to save, we've got some money from selling our cars, but I mean all the cars there are super cheap, and then we have to go buy so much more to replace,
Hmm.
to get started in housing. I mean, did you guys, when you were getting your place in New Jersey, did you have to do application fees and like the whole process?
We did, and I can't actually remember exactly what the application fee cost was, because
They're typically like
it
a hundred
was,
bucks.
yeah, it was something like that. But we also had to do like a credit report, so it was like a
Yeah.
combination of like application and credit report fee and whatever. But it cost us $12,000 just to get into our apartment, like
Yeah.
just the apartment, and that's not even buying the car. So we sold both of our cars and we started to save up some. And then part of that savings went into $12,000 to get into an apartment. But then on top of that, we had to get a car. And we managed to get that before we left Okinawa through the military auto source. And that was
Okay.
$42,000.
Yeah.
Like that was
Yeah.
something we were not really prepared for. And nobody had expected in general, like the inflation that
Yeah.
happened while we were there.
Well, that and the demand for used cars. I mean, that was our thing. We were going to come back and buy used cars. We sold
Yes.
my beautiful, wonderful, amazing Suburban to our friend, and we sold our house right like in May, and then 2 months later, it was $200,000 more than what we sold it for. Like it went
Yeah.
up that quickly. So nobody could have prepared for that. Coming back, we had to buy, a car for me, a car for my
Hmm.
husband. We wanted, to have a car for our oldest because she helps drive the kids around, and I didn't want to have to drive her to work. And then, because she was so close to 18, there were some places we were looking at that wanted application fees for
For
her as well
her,
because she was practically an adult.
oh my gosh.
And so, it was just such a mess. And so we
Yeah.
talked to our realtor that sold our house, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I can get you in, we can look at a house. I'm it came out that he had sold his house and he's kind of waiting for the market to change. So he kind of sold at the top and he's ready to buy at the low. So we're like, okay, if you're not buying, we're not buying.
Right.
And we really lucked out in getting this house because we didn't have to do application fees. We didn't have to like throw down, $12,000 or, first month's last month security
Right.
deposit, all the things like it's a retired general and his wife, and they bought this house for their family in like the 80s when it was first built. And then they kept it as a rental and they've kept the rent fairly low to, help other Marines and their
That's
families and
nice.
service members. They're incredible people from everything that we know about them and we've seen. So really like a huge answer to our prayers when it came to getting this house. But I mean, it is so much more moving overseas than
So
people
much.
realize, going there and coming back, because it's a huge financial burden and we're
Hmm.
not necessarily, compensated, reimbursed for any of the
Yeah.
things.
I mean, they would actually do a really great job, I feel like, as frustrating as it is. They do a really great job when going there. Now things have changed a little bit, but like they have furniture you can use until your
Yeah.
stuff arrives. They even have like pots and pans you can use if you need to. Like they've got all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. Coming back, especially if you're not going to a base. If you're not going to a base, you don't have any options. If you're going to a base, some of them have pots and pans or like lawnmowers, stuff like that, but they don't have like furniture. So
Yeah.
that was one of the difficulties. We
Yeah.
moved back and our stuff was in storage for another year. We not only didn't have the government furniture, we also didn't have our storage stuff because we were in a location where they continued to hold our stuff for us, which was great
Yeah.
because
Because it was 1 year.
one
Yeah.
year and with New York, New Jersey, you have no idea what size place you're getting. Like for BAH, we couldn't afford anything big enough to hold our entire house with stuff. Like that's not going to happen. So that was just adding more to it. And I just felt like we were bleeding money all the time for about
Yeah.
6 months or more after we got in the
Yeah.
house. That didn't even include the amount of time that because we spent 3 months just in Oklahoma. The rest of the
Hmm.
time was just like,
Yeah. And
we were
that's
just
not
bleeding
counting
money.
dance.
Yeah, not including dance and getting the kids back into whatever activities they were doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was crazy. But one of the really nice things was we ended up being 8 minutes from a Japanese shopping center and a Japanese market, Mitsuwa.
Perfect.
I know people know Mitsuwa, and then there was a Daiso. We had a Daiso, and that ended up
We have
being
a
where the
Daiso here.
we don't have one here. I'm like, people, why don't we have one? There's one in Delaware though, so like I could drive over there, but
Yeah.
still. Um, but yeah, it was actually Daiso shared a wall with the dance studio, so I would just pop back and forth. But
Ah,
Daisos here aren't the same prices. Like it's nice to go in and
no.
get them, but you're paying American prices and it sucks. But
Yeah.
the nice thing about Mitsuwa is they have a food court. So
Oh,
like
that's awesome.
yeah, so we could get, I mean, we couldn't get the Okinawa foods. So, you were dealing with more udon than with
Hmm.
soba, with Okinawa soba, which is different from mainland soba. Um, but it was really nice to have that, to be able to kind of slowly bring ourselves back into American
Yeah.
foods. But
It's super nice to have that like ease because it is a culture shock
mhm,
and you do feel like a tourist in your home country. I mean,
very much.
we've come back to a place we consider home. And like you said, going into New York was incredibly overwhelming. Um, but I mean, the last time we came, it was also in January, but we got sick. So, like, American germs and sicknesses, like that came back into our system with full force. So, that one was a little bit something we didn't, anticipate. And then, like you said, you have the general financial burden. So that element is incredibly challenging. But
Yeah.
the portions were probably the first thing that we experienced, especially coming back the last time. We were more prepared this time. The last time, American portions, like they're bigger. Everybody does the McDonald's country to country comparison.
Right. Oh,
But until
McDonald's
you sit
Japan.
down, yeah,
Yeah.
until you sit down after eating a certain way in certain places for 3 years, like in Asia especially, and then you sit down to an American meal. There is no preparing you for
No,
that.
there's really not. There's really not. I mean, the only thing that could be similar, I think, is if you go when you go in and you get sets, right? You
Hmm.
sit down and you go and you get a full set, and then you're getting the closest thing to an American proportion. And for those of you who don't know, a set is like it's kind of like getting a multi-course meal all at one time. So you
Hmm.
just get a tray with a salad, oftentimes a soup too, depending on where you are, and then your main meal. And then they may or may not include some type of like sweet or something.
Jelly.
Yeah, yeah, that's usually what it was.
Yeah.
Jelly, little cups of them, but
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this tour, Google Translate was a huge help.
huge. So
Yeah.
much. Yes.
We
Yeah.
didn't have that the first time. So honestly, as like it pains me to say we didn't have as much and try as many foods the first time. I mean, we did the candies because my kids, my husband, they love the sugar, but
Right.
this time they definitely, because of Google Translate, were able to see more. I mean, my husband's weird with some things, but ooh, do you ever drive on the wrong side of the road? Still.
So I almost turned down the wrong side the other day, but I think that was more because I didn't realize there was a median there. But no, I tend to do the Okie wave. That's my problem is the Okie wave. So windshield wipers instead of blinker or blinker
Yeah.
instead of windshield wipers. And like,
I mean, the first time I drove in Okinawa back in 2012, I like immediately was on the wrong side of the road and was like, wait, no, this isn't right.
right.
And then I don't really remember messing up. And then we moved back. And for 5 years living in the States, I would find myself on the wrong side of the road when leaving my house to like go to the beach or like down our street, straight street. I would be on the wrong side of the road.
Hmm.
And that happened consistently for 5 years. Obviously, it was like once a month or something random. And then in Okinawa, I was like, wait, what side of the road am I supposed to be on? Because we lived in the farmland the first year. And even back here now, I'll randomly be on the wrong side of the, and it's always on my street. Thankfully, it's only leaving my house that I have these issues of which
That's
side of the road.
Yeah. It was a solid 6 months back before I was like really thinking that I was not going to have like certain problems. Yeah. But I do feel like I could hop back in. So it's been almost not quite two years for me. And I feel like I could hop back into Japan and drive anywhere.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, once you've done it for 3 years, you've lived there,
yeah.
it's not difficult to do at all.
I mean, my driver's license is still in my wallet. I've
Yep,
kept
mine
it.
too.
I've kept it. Of course,
Hmm.
it's not valid, but that's not the point.
Yeah. I have both of them,
Oh,
actually.
do you really? My license is actually only like 2 weeks old. It's not even my
Yeah.
original one because I had to get a new one right before we left. I still feel comfortable. It also makes me want to go to like England. I'm like, why not? I'm
Yeah.
already used to being on that side of the road. Let's do it before I forget
And
how.
narrow roads.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
roads are very narrow.
Yes. Very narrow. We also didn't
Yeah.
have any problems with our shipment getting moldy either. Did you guys have any mold problems?
Going there, we did. We packed out. We were here in Southern California. We packed out, and like some of our gym equipment had mold. And
Hmm.
then our system for leaving, somebody had mentioned this, and it was if you have, everyone has dehumidifiers. You have to
Yes.
have them in your house or it gets nasty.
It's so gross.
So, especially if you're leaving in spring, summer, stop running your dehumidifiers like 2 months before you pack out and start getting your furniture acclimated to the humidity, the moisture, the different, weather, because they're going to be on a ship coming overseas back to the States. They're going to come to California and then they're going to have to ship them wherever. So we didn't have any mold coming back this time. And I mean, it was raining. It was probably the
Yes.
most humid day in, when did we pack up our stuff? May. Probably the most humid day we had in May. By the time they were packing us up, I thought for sure we were going to have mold and all
Yeah.
kinds of things, and we didn't have any problem.
Yeah. It
So,
it rained on them as they have super awesome trucks, like really cool trucks that they kind of Tesla wing style lift up
yeah.
on the sides. And they ended up putting the two trucks side by side and putting wood between them. And then they lifted them so that there was a roof going across where the crates were going to go. But they had to get from the house to the truck. And thankfully it wasn't pouring down rain. But it did rain on them as they were taking the crates out there. We didn't have, our house wasn't crazy humid, and I didn't necessarily do that, but I didn't really have any mold problems. One of the things actually that I learned from my neighbor when I helped her pack out, and I highly recommend this for all movers, is to get these Avery waterproof stickers. And
Hmm.
we got like a super bright and almost, oh, they're in the closet over here. But we got a super bright color one so that they're noticeable. And we put our names and our phone numbers. We did not put the address on them because we have had problems where things went into storage and then years later we weren't still there. They ended up finding it and then they were like, "Hey, we found this thing. We need to mail it to you." Fine. But if you put the address, they're going to mail it to whatever address you were going to. So instead, we put
Yeah.
our phone numbers and I think an email or maybe both emails so that it was like a
Mhm.
neutral, it doesn't matter where we are. This is how
Yeah.
you can get a hold of us. And I gave Lexi that and she went through and made sure it was on every box. And we
Smart.
if we couldn't be in there, the movers actually asked us. We told them we were like, "Hey,
Oh,
we really want this." And so they actually asked us if we had any, and we went through and did that on each of them. And then I put Apple tags. I actually still have one taped to our our Bowflex bike. We put Apple
nice.
tags on all of the big things, partly
Yeah.
because it was making a giant trip across the world, but also we that was the summer like when things were disappearing. Like whole
Yeah.
trucks were just gone. And I was like, "Nope, we're not. Nope,
Yeah.
no.
Well, people have lost entire crates. It's ridiculous.
It's
I mean,
ridiculous."
one of our friends, it was going to Okinawa this time, but their crate literally fell off and destroyed like her brand new table,
Oh my
all these
gosh.
things. Um, there, there, there are risks you play, but
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Definitely did. And we got a lot of tips from the Okie Peeps Facebook page and some of
yeah,
the ones specific to those because, wherever you're going, people who are already, they're already there and they can tell you if whatever they did worked and or
yeah,
didn't work. So there's
yeah.
there's so much stuff. Like in a quick rundown of all of this, it's the master calendar, the list,
Hmm.
you know, ask people. A lot of it is ask people who have done it before
Yeah.
because,
Well, join the Facebook groups and
yeah,
then kind of research what other people have said because we're all in this together. Like we've all made the same trip and some people have, systems that work for them, not so much for you. I mean, it really is a pick your own adventure.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the important thing, the two like key things to remember, embrace the suck
the suck
and it will not ever go as planned ever.
ever, never
As
ever.
long as you're okay with that, it's worth it. It's worth it to go.
It is. It's 100% worth it to go and not be a a tourist. To,
Yeah.
like to really live somewhere. Be yourself. We got to live on our, we were us. We lived our life. We had dance, we
Yeah.
had school, we had what you would do on an everyday, but we also got to live there to truly experience it. Even during COVID, we got to do that.
Yeah. And again, living, in a foreign land, you really see the difference
Hmm.
in, culture and, behavior.
Yes, very much so. It was slightly easier going to Oki because Lexi was 3.
Hmm.
She was tiny. Zoe was moving with her best friend in the world. They're a week apart in age. Her mom and I have been like besties since we met at TBS and we realized that we were due 3 days apart. While we were leaving family, we had said certain goodbyes. The real one that was tough for me was leaving my grandparents because I knew I'd never see them again. I knew that that was the
Mm.
end. And that was hard. Um, but once I made my peace with that, then it wasn't, I said my goodbyes and so that made it a little bit easier, as easy as you can
Yeah.
make that. But coming back, that was a shocker. Coming back was much harder on
Like a
our
time
little
traveler.
family. Yeah, like it was rough, much harder coming back than I
Yeah.
had expected to
You
be.
when you're in Okinawa, you're in a bubble and
Hmm.
you are with the people that become your family. I mean,
Very much.
obviously we've got we've got our compound now. But like you truly build your family
Very much.
because that's all you have. And as much as we keep connections and friends and even family in contact stateside, we don't have that same like everyday in and out. And dealing with COVID really impacted those friendships and made them that much more lasting.
Yeah.
That I mean, of course, coming back this time is going to be harder. Our kids were older, so it was harder in a completely different way.
Right.
Um, both times they were excited to come back, but we'd planned to come back, and then we decided to extend. And again, that's another topic for another day. But we were staying, and that was what we were doing. And our oldest was like, "Man, I wanted to go back home." Okay, she finally like comes to terms with the fact that we're staying, and they're like, "Oh, you have orders. You're leaving this summer, like in 2 months or whatever it was." And she was like devastated because she had finally clicked with a friend and figured
Right.
it out and accepted it. So that that was hard. And there's not really a day or a week that goes by that she doesn't talk about some aspect of Okinawa that she misses.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the military life
Hmm.
anyway. Like that's what the kids have to deal with. And I mean, I think it makes them far more resilient than most children because they have this level of adversity that they're dealing with nonstop. And I mean, they have this connection with friends right away. When you move to Okinawa, you get friends that understand your lifestyle
Hmm.
100%. But coming back, you're kind of different and weird because you move all the time.
Yeah.
You haven't been here this whole time.
Yeah. Well, now that we have covered all of the really like strong stuff, let's get into some of the happier sections of it. First off, what are we reading? Lacey, what are you reading?
Well, it's not exactly happy. I just finished Lone Survivor.
Hmm.
Um, I had seen the movie. I knew the story. I do Murph every year for the last like 13 years, and knew the story, but opted not to read it. I'm a fiction reader like you are. I
Yes.
read fiction. So it was kind of funny that you said you're doing what is a month with no
20,
fiction. And
21
I had
days.
yeah, and I had already kind of committed to reading this. And so I was like, oh, like, yeah, it's the same thing. Same. It takes me a long time to get through reading just because, lots of kids I read at night before I fall asleep. So I was reading Lone Survivor and I am so grateful that I waited until retirement
Right.
because it's as intense as the movie is. It is just 1,000 times more than that. And it really affected me in so many ways that I'm just really starting to kind of register that that might have been the catalyst. Like, I haven't been on social media. I'll get on to like check our messages and then like with Instagram, and then I'll like get on to see things that I've posted for sale on Facebook, and that is it. I close it down. So every Monday I get a new workout, and I didn't know what it was. I had to literally go to the app to see what it was, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And now I start to, realize and make these connections. It was his experience up in the mountains being completely isolated, and everything he went through and everything that Murph and Axe and Danny and all the boys went through, that I was like, oh my gosh, what am I wasting my time on, like scrolling?
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
could be spending this time with my family, and it's had a huge impact on me. And I think that reading that book is the catalyst for why I just decided to not do it. Like, my husband's been on me for years, but that was like that was the moment. So
That
I've
was
got
it.
a lot of feelings with that one.
Ironic of all, uh, I also read a seal book. I, like she said, I am 100%, okay, we'll say 99.7% a fiction reader. But at church, right after New Year's, we were doing a 21-day fast, and it wasn't food. It was supposed to be something that challenged you. And in the past, I have done various things for Lent, but it occurred to me that what truly was actually something that was difficult was giving up fiction books, not giving up books, but giving up fiction books because I blow through them. I really do. But
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, no fiction books for 21 days. Wyatt, what do you have? Because he rarely reads fiction books. He was so excited, so excited. So one of them, this wasn't the first one, but it's the one that I'm going to talk about today, is called Extreme Ownership, and it's by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They were the leaders of SEAL Team 3 and Task Force Bruiser. And they taking their time in this with the SEALs, and they were actually the leaders of that task force and of like Chris Kyle. He was one of their guys. But it's really taking the lessons that they learned there and figuring out, and not so much figuring out, but just utilizing it in our world now and in the business world specifically. So
Yeah.
they've created a whole program over extreme ownership and how to use that in your business roles. But as I was going, it 100% translates to life. Like, yes, they use
Yeah.
it for that, but it is truly about stepping back and taking ownership. And it's not just that, but it all boils down to those two words, and it's taking ownership of everything. Because
Yeah.
it's, if it's someone under you who didn't do it right and that translates, and now you have to go up and tell somebody above you that it didn't work and whose fault it is, it's your fault because what? You didn't set it up correctly to make sure that they understood the parameters of whatever it was, or you didn't nip something in the bud when it needed to be taken care of. It actually was so good that Zoe was listening to part of it, and I was talking about it one day um, because something had happened at home, and I
Hmm.
immediately actually took it to heart, and I used that, and I was like, she was it's something that Yami had gotten a hold of, potential of getting really, really sick from it. Yami's our dog, and the potentiality of her getting really sick and having a surgery. And she is just sobbing and losing it. And she's like, I'm killing our dog. I'm like, no, you're not. And I stopped her. I was like, this is my fault. This is something that I knew that your door was open and I didn't walk over there and make sure that it was closed. And I didn't do this part too. And yes, there were things where she didn't close her door, but she had her purse in her room like she was supposed to. So it's not that she
Yeah.
just did things wrong. She didn't leave it out and about, and she didn't do this stuff. But I also had the responsibility in that. Like, this was not about her. This was about me and making sure, because if I made the rule, then I also have to keep up with that rule. And it just applies to so many areas. And it's a very moving book anyway, because it kind of, much like with that one, it goes through the initial taking of Ramadi. And actually, like, all of their major points are happening there. And it is extreme. Like,
Hmm.
if you're not familiar with that, it is just this one book will give you a good chance. It's not truly a war book. However, it does have wartime scenes in it. It does have that discussion because these are SEALs. These are men who have put in a lot, and where sometimes people will be like, "Oh, they're SEALs," and blah. No, these SEALs are still there for a reason, and these men in particular did some they saw and had to deal with some serious areas, and like a single step could have been very dangerous for anything that was hidden under the ground. And so they do have that in there, but then they translate it over, and it is quite remarkable to see how you can work it into your own life without, you know, having to go through BUDS
Yeah.
training. I don't want to go through BUDS training to learn this stuff.
That's definitely going on my list
Yes.
to read. I have a long list. What you may not know,
What you may not know.
the island is small. It's, 70.6% is allotted for US military facilities, primarily on Okinawa. And Okinawa only accounts for 0.6% of the total land area in Japan. So on Okinawa, it's 67 miles long, and at its most narrow point, it's 2 miles wide.
I
I
thought at
think.
most narrow it was only a half mile wide.
Oh, so I always said it was a mile. I always thought it was a mile. But when I was doing my research for this little bit, it goes from 2 miles wide to 17 miles wide,
Oh, okay.
and that's it.
I guess
Yeah.
it just at that one point where you can climb up into the view tower and
Yep.
see both the East China Sea and the Pacific at the same time. It just looked a whole lot
It
smaller.
it does. And so I mean that could be wrong, but this is the Okinawa like office. Well,
Right.
it's Okinawa Information.org. Yeah. And so the US population there is 80,000, which is actually much smaller
It
because when we
is.
got there in 2020 it was 100,000, and that's with, now the numbers are 30,000 active duty military from all four branches. And then you have 1,400 DoD civilians, Department of Defense, and then 700 of their dependents, school teachers, staff, and then about 25,000 U.S. family members. So it is literally a ton of Americans on this itty bitty tiny island. And we're really concentrated into the center, like south center of the island.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really live out in the northern or the southern parts because there are no bases.
Well, there's so much more that we could cover, but I'm assuming at this point everybody's eyes are starting to glaze over. And if you're looking at going overseas, you possibly might be dreading an Oconus move, but don't. It really is amazing. I highly recommend it to anyone who is looking at going out there, going anywhere. It doesn't even have to be there, but getting the chance to go somewhere that is not your home and or possibly your home country. Look into doing that.
We chose to go back. I
Hmm.
mean, that right there tells you everything. We chose to go back with our kids. They were excited. So, I mean, if you've got a move ahead of you, we know moves are stressful. And this one, it is, but it's so worth it. Then the stress isn't really, it's the stress is not anything. The challenge isn't anything in comparison to the blessings and the joy and the excitement that you get from living there. So, definitely think about that if you're up for orders to go overseas. It's one of the best decisions you could make and one of the best places you could live. So thank you so much for joining the virtual compound today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please stay tuned for more episodes and content. And information detailed in this podcast can be found online at firstmawmarines.mil and dc-office.org.
6. Not SEAL Team 6. So, to SEAL Team 6. No, to SEAL Team 3. I'm sorry, Jocko and Leif. I will edit that out. I saw those Jello things for the first time. I was like, I think that they're non-alcoholic, but I can't read their packaging, so I don't know.